Yes, welcome in. The swing is back. Took a little bit of a vacation from the swing. A lot of football stuff going on. Basketball team not playing a ton of games over the last few weeks here in December, but they will be back in action on Friday night when the Iowa Hawkeyes and Fran McCaffrey come to town. I don't know that we're going to get a Frantrum, Jesse. It doesn't. I haven't seen a lot of that from him lately. It's very disappointing.
I'm always holding out hope. Why don't you have in your background the Frantrum meter? I feel like that should be an added graphic, or I mean, you got all those credentials. I know you wouldn't want to put something Fran related back there, but I just feel like it would add to the overall zhuzh of what you got going on.
Oh, you don't think I have something of? I had the Frantrum meter back here last year.
I think that's why I'm asking. Where did it go?
So I did a national podcast one time, and I thought it would be a little bit unprofessional to have that sitting back there. So I took it out, and I just have never rearranged everything back out there. But now that it is officially basketball season, I will throw it back out there. Professionalism has never been something I've really abided by anyways. So maybe I don't know why I did that, but I did. And you're right. Thank you for calling me out. It definitely needs to get back in behind the screen. For people listening, you have no idea what we're talking about. Go to YouTube, check it out. We are on the Camps YouTube page, and we're going to be posting all of our swing episodes there as well. Plenty to get to, including a special guest. We have a special guest, Jordan Taylor, former Badger point guard, and also new Big Ten Network personality, both in studio and in color as well. Had a great conversation with him, about a half an hour, get into a lot of different stuff, both Badgers and college basketball and everything else. So looking forward for you guys to be able to hear that. But I think before we get going, Home Field Apparel, the official apparel sponsor of the swing and the camp. They have the best vintage gear you can possibly find. Go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. So I wanted to start this a little bit just in a big picture, because we are 13 games into this, right? Wisconsin's 13 games in. They are 10-3, 0-2 in Big Ten play, and they'll look to get off the schneid on Friday. But what you've seen so far, has it matched your expectations, exceeded your expectations, or has it not hit those expectations? And I know we've done shows, so it's not like we haven't talked about some of this stuff, but just where you feel things are at right now.
My perspective is I think the first 13 games have exceeded my expectations, but that has to do with I felt like the bar was fairly low coming into the season, largely because I had no idea what to expect. And I imagine a lot of listeners and viewers might feel the same way, just because the roster was so new. You're bringing in a couple freshmen, 3 freshmen on scholarship when you throw in Ricardo Greppi, who was obviously the later add, and then you've got the 3 transfer portal additions. I didn't know what those guys were going to provide. Who knew John Tonji was going to come in and immediately be a dude who could average about 20 points a game at this point, was going to get you 41 in a game, 33 in another game. And what Xavier Amos and Cam Hunter would provide. And I know Hunter has been slow to start here, was dealing with an injury. But you throw in the fact that Wisconsin was picked in the preseason to finish, I believe, tied for 12th in this 18-team league. I thought maybe this is a team that's going to miss the NCAA tournament, struggle a little bit. But the start couldn't have gone any better. You beat a team like Arizona. And I know that they had the 3-game losing skid, and that certainly probably clouds how people feel about the team right now. But if you would have said 13 games in, Wisconsin will be 10-3 and be a team that has positioned itself for an NCAA tournament bid. Obviously, we've got the rest of the Big Ten season to go. I think most people would take that. And I look at those 3 losses. They are, if there is such a thing as good losses. Illinois is 9th in the country in the NCAA net rankings. Marquette is 12th. And Michigan is 16th. I know Michigan isn't currently in the AP top 25, but those are all very good teams, and they're going to have ample opportunity to build on the resume. So overall, I think they've exceeded expectations. And what's also, I suppose, encouraging just to watch is it's entertaining basketball to watch. They're scoring way more than I thought they would. They're shooting threes way more than I thought they would. So on the whole, I think, to me, they've exceeded expectations by being 10-3 at this point and playing the way that they have for the most part.
What's Arizona in the net rankings?
They are not as good, I think, as we thought they were going to be. But it was an early season statement against a team that at the time was a top 10 team in a marquee situation to show where Wisconsin could potentially be as a program. Because at that point, they'd only played a handful of games and not against particularly great teams.
That was not a shot. I apparently need to make that clear to everybody. That was when I say something that sounds like a shot, it's not always a shot.
I'm going to look it up for you here. Okay.
Yeah.
We're here for
Well,
answers.
I guess my question is like, we talk about those being good losses. What's
They're
their best
24.
win? Okay. So at 7-5,
mm-hmm.
they beat TCU last night to get to 7-5. They're still up there. That's impressive. And I think they play in a conference now in the Big 12 that's probably the best in the country. I shouldn't say that. The SEC is really, really good too. The SEC and the Big 12 was it? Yeah, the SEC and the Big 12 are probably right there, and then maybe the Big 10. I may be speaking out of turn here. I don't know, but you said Wisconsin is 32nd, I believe, right?
I think 34. Yeah, 34. But
34, and there's 8 Big 10 teams ahead of them.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I was tracking it. Like, this is the time of the year when I really sort of nerd out on the net rankings, just because it's kind of the metric or the most significant metric that the committee uses, and you just get a sense. It's the fairest sense, I think, about where teams are. But yeah, like, I mean, even Penn State is sitting there at 32 ahead of them, but Michigan State, Michigan, you can go down the list. Maryland, obviously. So it is a really difficult league. And you could say, okay, there aren't a ton of truly great wins that Wisconsin has so far, but I think they've positioned themselves very well. And I'm encouraged by what I've seen for the most part, despite that 3-game lull.
Yeah, no, it definitely has been. All right, real quickly before we jump into our interview with Jordan, this is not big picture. This is players, maybe superlatives here, a little bit. Your biggest surprise. I already used surprise here. The nicest surprise for Wisconsin so far, individually.
Oh, I think it's without a doubt John Tanji. I don't know how you can say it's not, largely because I didn't know what Wisconsin had in him. Yeah, he was a very good player for Colorado State, but then he went to Missouri. He was hurt. He did not play very much. I think it became clear, especially in the preseason when we got a chance to finally watch, because it's like, well, what is the starting lineup going to look like? Not only was he a starter, but he was like the most consistent, best scorer. For him to do what he did early on, I think really showed what he's capable of. And I know that it's tapered off a bit. He's coming off a game where he scored in single digits, but there haven't been very many Wisconsin players over the years that have been in that 20 points per game range. And I realize Wisconsin is scoring more, but he's got to be number one for me, because largely, again, a lot of these have to do with what the expectations are. And I don't think any of us truly knew when he signed with Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think the one thing, and Greg actually mentioned it after, I think it was probably after the Detroit Mercy game, of needing to play through or play on or play up through 2 feet, as opposed to, because that's how you're going to draw the fouls. And he has been more adept at drawing fouls than maybe any Wisconsin player that I can remember, like especially a guard or a wing. Like, we've seen bigs get hacked all the time down there, but he just finds a way. And I guess my biggest question there is, can that continue? Will Big Ten refs or officials that see the Big Ten a lot maybe start officiating him differently? Just because of the way that he's able to draw contact, maybe it's a little bit different, but he's got a knack for it. I think that is obvious. And when you shoot it at 94% and you're getting there as much as he has, your points are going to come. And that's why he's averaging 19.5 points a game.
Yeah, you can say what you want about field goal percentage and those types of things, but at this point, if you're a 90+% free throw shooter, that feels like a thing that is here to stay. In terms of how many attempts he gets per game, harder to say. I do think that has got to be a concern moving forward, because we see, especially in the Big Ten, when the teams scout you very well and they know you, and I realize you're playing teams fewer times now. You're not going to have 2 games against teams often, but these guys know each other very well. And so, but he's going to be able to get his points. And I think that one of the reasons is you have to honor the fact that he can score at all 3 levels. And so you can't just sag off and let him shoot threes. But I don't know if it's going to end up being 19+ points per game, because it just gets tougher. But he's going to be the leading scorer very clearly, and everything has got to go through him in order for Wisconsin to succeed.
All right. So biggest disappointment to this point?
Man, disappointment's probably
I know you're going to do this.
strong word here,
Yeah,
but
you just
let me. So here's a couple things that I think I would have liked to have seen more of. I think not seeing Daniel Freitag on the floor based on what we thought, but it's completely understandable, and I know why. Just because at the time he committed, he was the highest rated signee that Greg Gard had, and you wanted to see some of that explosiveness right away. It hasn't happened for him. So it's not that like I think he is a disappointment. I think he's got a really bright future here, but just from what my expectations were, would have liked to have seen what he could do as a freshman. But again, he's just not ready for the moment right now, and that's okay. I think Max Klesman has really struggled as a three-point shooter this year. He shot almost 40% last year, and right now he's shooting a career low like 28% or so. And we've talked multiple times. He can get it going. It could happen in the next game against Iowa, but just someone who shot it at that high of a rate, I think, that has kind of been a struggle for him. But every guy you could go down the roster and say there are moments or things that they haven't done well at this point. I think those are a couple that stand out initially.
we just going to ignore Stephen Crowell?
Well, so I was going to say that too. He has a game against Illinois where he has no rebounds, and Greg Gard specifically calls him out. If you are looking for a silver lining, you're going into the heart of Big Ten play now, where he's had back-to-back pretty solid games. He had 9 points, no rebounds in that loss to Illinois. In these last two games, he's got 33 points, I think 10 rebounds collectively, and he went 7 of 10 from the field in both of those games. This has been a consistent conversation with Steven is how can you play more like that all the time? But obviously you can't be 7 foot starting center and have no rebounds in a game. That's obviously unacceptable. And that's why Greg was willing to call him out after the game.
He doesn't do that very often.
No.
Like he'll call a guy out at practice. He'll call a guy out in film. He'll call guys maybe in other ways. Doesn't do it in a press conference very often. I could probably count on one hand the number of times he's done it.
I think he's at a point, a couple things. One, that he's at a point where he's comfortable enough in where he is at Wisconsin to be able to do that. But I think you have to do that with the type of player that can handle it, where you have a good enough relationship. And when it's a guy who's a multi-year starter who himself knows that he needs to be performing at a better level, I think that it is okay. But obviously you have to be very selective about when you choose to publicly say something about a player for a lack of performance. But Steve would be the first to admit you can't have no rebounds in a critical Big Ten game, and I imagine that's something that is going to be better here moving forward. But he just has to be more of a factor. He's just got to be consistent, which we've been saying for 3-4 years.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's jump into our interview with Jordan Taylor. Come back on the other side, do a little overreaction or no. But here he is, Jordan Taylor. And we do welcome in a special guest. It is former Badger star and current Big Ten Network star, Jordan Taylor. Jordan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Star is you got a loose definition of the word star, but I appreciate it, man. It's good to see you guys.
I wanted to start here because I know it will make you think a little bit. But are you prepared for what's going to happen when the Vikings fall flat on their face here in the next few weeks? Because that's just what happens with Minnesota sports teams, right?
Yeah, fun update. I've been gone for about 10 years now. I'm now a Chiefs fan. I have an affinity to winners, and Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is fun to watch, so I'm a Vikings and Chiefs fan, man. But that preps me for the possibility and strong likelihood that the Vikings do fall flat on their face. But still hopeful.
That's very good defending of your heart there, because there's going to be some heartbreak, but you're probably going to win a championship. I mean, that's a very 90s thing of Wisconsin to do. Like early in the 90s, growing up when I was a kid, you had to have a second team because Wisconsin sucked at everything, and so you'd always have a second team. But yeah, either way, wanted to you've been doing obviously done playing, right?
Yep.
After an extensive career. And what's it been like in retirement now that you've jumped into media a little bit?
It's been great, man. It's it's a fun time to get into media. It's a fun time to be a part of basketball. I'm retiring just I had so many people that gave back to me along my journey. So now that's really my focus in a multitude of ways. Because there's so many options around basketball, there's a lot of different ways you can give back to these young players, from elementary all the way up to professional now, which is something that I'm looking forward to tackling.
You dabbled in media for quite some time and obviously have always been very good with interviews. At what point in your playing career did you realize this could be the next phase for me?
Um, I think honestly, my coach Moore, Howard Moore, he told me to get in touch with Quentin Carter. I think maybe my senior year is either my senior height of college or like I think maybe my second year overseas, whatever it was, and I was injured, and I was just going through the injury. Probably disappointed about injury, so I wish I would have taken more time while I was hurt. I didn't really understand the space, but while I was hurt, I wish I would have been in the studio then, while I was still playing. But yeah, probably back then. To answer your question, I've ran my mouth for a long time. I talk a lot, so it's a it's a good fit.
So you've been doing the podcast for a couple of years now here, and that has given you maybe a bigger view of and been able to stay in contact, I guess, with college when you're overseas. Now that you're even more in it, does it open your eyes to all, what is it, 18 teams now? Do you have a good feel now for what the Big Ten is?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's Coach Ryan had the same basketball doesn't change, and it's always to say that's he was definitely right about that. Yeah, getting a feel for who's who, and I always did have an idea, but everybody's transferring now, so it's tough to I imagine back in the day, doing Big Ten was easy. You got the same four guys, you got the same guys for 4 years, but yeah, getting reacclimated and honestly, that makes it fun. Doing some of these non-con games, you get to see guys who might be in the Big Ten in a couple of years or the next year. So there's a lot of pros to the transfer stuff as well.
What do you enjoy most about doing the BTN work, and what do you find to be the most significant challenge in stepping into this media role?
Ooh, honestly, I haven't found a lot of challenges yet. It's been fun. They make it easy, honestly. It's almost like being a player in terms, they take care of you and obviously with logistically and things like that. And the producers and I was able to work with so far really good play-by-play guys and Revson and Kylan Mills and I was with Seth Davis. They all make it super easy. So I've always been a point guard. Now I'm just a guy who stands in the corner and shoots threes and hopefully I hit a couple.
Let's jump into the basketball aspect of this with Wisconsin. Starting with Wisconsin because obviously that's where our focus is. I don't know that anybody knew exactly what to expect out of this group because you had so many new faces with transfers and younger guys stepping up and so many points going out the door and assists and steals and everything else like that going out the door. What's been your impression of them here through the first, I guess, what is it, 13, 14 games of the season so far?
Yeah, I mean, they started off well, and they obviously the Arizona game was fun. Tanji's been another great transfer guy that Coach Guard and them have brought in. I think it's a unique Wisconsin team in that they don't have like a traditional point guard, or a traditional playmaker. So John Blackwell, I think Tanji gets all the love for scoring as he should. But John Blackwell, I think, has been the best player. Just and he hasn't shot it well, but in being able to take on that role or fill the void that Chucky left, which is a big one. I think he's been incredible. So as he continues to settle into that role, and hopefully, Cam Hunter or a Daniel Freitag can continue to mature, and Kamari keeps getting better and better. If they can find another guy who can make plays for them, and hopefully Steven Crowd gets rolling a little bit, then excuse me, I think they have a ton of upside because I think it's going to open up the floor for Max, get more shots for him, get more shots, catch and shoot shots for John. And then Nolan Winter's a guy who is coming on strong right now. So they have the bones, it's there. I think they just have to kind of put the puzzle pieces together and hopefully it's sooner rather than later.
When you see that this team is averaging more than 81 points a game, taking 27 threes a game, what does that make you think as a former player in a system that was perhaps slightly different? And what do you think that says about just Greg Gard and what he's done to evolve as a coach?
Well, I don't want to over talk on this. I think it's dope because the system the actions are different, but the philosophy is the same, right? Like it's threes and layups. Like we were always taught that, and a few guys take mid range. Like we've had that before the NBA made it popular and all that. Coach Guard now, I think what's cool that about him is I think he's finding more and more every year his identity as a coach. And I think this year is really a culmination of the years of that. Like people, I think obviously I'm biased and people have been tough on him, as you guys know at times, but he's a two-time Big Ten Coach of the Year. And when you spend 23 years with, someone, and that's how you grow up, that's you learn, that's what you know. So it takes time to find your own, your own style, your own identity. I think you're seeing that with Coach Gar right now. And I think he's done an amazing job. And Kirk's been great bringing him in. I think with this transfer portal, you'll see more getting guys that I don't want to say these guys aren't conducive. You'll see kind of a little bit of a different style of players continue to come in too. So I'm excited for them. It's fun to watch. Still got to play a little defense, but if I'm not playing anymore, so shoot. If you ask me, screw defense, pass it to the basket, man. Get some shots up.
Would Bo Ryan be okay with the style of basketball they're playing right now?
I plead the fifth, man.
Okay.
No, I don't know. I'm sure he would. I think, again, philosophically, for sure. But, I think it doesn't really matter. I think that the coolest thing about it to me is that Coach Guard is really, not to say that he didn't have it before, because he's a grown man. I'm not trying to insinuate that, but I do think that you're really starting to see like this is who he's going to be, especially as the game is changing in terms of transfer portal and the business side of it.
Well, and also obviously they've tried to not take defense out of the game, but they've made it a lot more difficult to play defense, especially with the charge and everything that was I feel like made a little bit designed to make Wisconsin not play defense that way anymore, which is tough. That's a huge transition, and they've attacked it because you're not going to win too many games these days scoring 50, 60 points.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's a more attractive brand of basketball. I hope they can leverage it to their advantage and from a marketing standpoint. But from the defensive side, I wish they would have taken the charge rules out years ago. I think Tyler Wall took a charge in the Big Ten tournament last year on a roll man who didn't have the ball, and he got called for a block. My brother's an official. I was in the game. I told Tyler, I was like, "Hey, you should have got ejected for that because that was nonsense. Like, what are you doing? like that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen." So I liked some of that stuff. But yeah, no, they'll figure it out. Again, I think Coach Guard has shown time and time again, and having Kirk and Joe and all those guys done a great job. Bringing Greg on from the NBA. I think they're just better equipped now to find guys and continue to find guys, I should say, that will fit into this, changing style.
You mentioned that some of the philosophies haven't changed and that under Bo, you guys would try to get shots at the rim, 3-point shots. And I know he was big on the points per possession thing. What other kind of analytics did you guys have back then, or was that totally foreign? Because that's another thing that is so different now, is they have access to all this material.
Yeah, I don't know what other analytics we had access to. It was points per possession, but we were charting it by hand, right? Like I think, or not we. When I say we, shout out to all the managers that were standing right next to Coach Ryan, literally marking possessions. But yeah, now I think I like analytics. I think there's a place for it in terms of like application and things like that. But back then that was really it. And I think even with all these analytics now, it's still some of them overcomplicate things, like get good shots, play defense, move the ball. Like the game it's basketball. We're not curing cancer. We're not rocket scientists. And there's a lot of really good coaches out there, but I do think from time to time that analytics do more so for media and for outsiders overcomplicate the game.
So, Jordan, do you know what the school record for free throw percentage in a single season is for a team?
At Wisconsin?
Yeah.
I want to say it was around, it's anywhere from like 79 to 83%. I know we were close to it my junior year, and I think me and John banged like 9 free throws against Butler and blew the whole thing. So I would imagine they have it this year.
Well, you guys shot 81% in that 2010, 2011 year,
Yeah.
and this group is shooting 85%. Is it, I don't want to say is it sustainable because it's your best like it's all about who's shooting your free throws. In
Yeah.
past years, like when it's Ethan Happ or it's fill-in guy who's not a very good shooter at the line, you're going to shoot a lower percentage as a team. When you have a guy like John Tonji shooting as many free throws as he does, you're probably going to be shooting that high up. But that's just an insane percentage. I mean, to be 4% higher than the school record at this point is just insane.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. And Tanji, and I think Tanji specifically with the volume that he's getting and shooting that percentage is pretty crazy. And again, that goes back to me. That's probably the most unanalytical stat that we have now, I guess, is the regular free throw percentage. But again, get to the line, make your free throws, don't turn the ball over, and you'll get extra shots at the basket. So I guess without going on a tangent, I think it's sustainable, because to your point, yeah, it depends on who's shooting the free throws, and if you have a guy who's getting to the line like Tanji, and if John Blackwell continues to get to the line, those guys are going to make them, unless something catastrophic happens to them and they get the yips, knock on wood. Then yeah, I think 100% is sustainable.
So put your point guard hat on here for a minute. I wanted to ask you about Blackwell, since you've mentioned him a
Yeah.
couple of times. He's taken on a different role. I think we're used to seeing a so-called true point guard like a Kamari McGee or whoever it may be. John can do multiple different things, but when you watch him play, what stands out about his game and some of the challenges he's having to deal with handling the primary ball handler role this season?
Yeah, I think what stands out about his game is the fact that he can literally do everything. And statistically, I think he's shooting 48% from the field, which is up 4% from last year, but he's down like 17 points from the 3-point percentage, which to me is not necessarily, it's not all his fault, right? Like it's not like he's not getting reps up. It's just he's getting different type of threes. You get, instead of having Chucky out there putting 2 feet in the paint, or AJ, well, I should say AJ didn't pass gas. So it's like, having Chucky getting paint touches and Steven playing inside and out, which they haven't done as much. They're more off the dribble threes or let's catch and shoot. But his ability to get in the paint now and create for other guys and be the guy, be the paint touch guy while finishing and creating. I don't think people understand how hard that is to do just in general. But I wouldn't say John's a natural point guard. I'd say he's a combo, right? He can, and to me, that's when you can just flip a switch like that. That's incredible. And that's why I say I think he's been the best player on the team. Now, again, if you can get another guy to step up and, whether it's Kamari or Tanji being a little more of a facilitator when he touches the paint, and you can open up John scoring as well. I think, he's averaging 14, 15. I think he's a guy where he gets up to that, 18, 19. Not only that, on top of that, he's the point of attack guy on defense a lot of times. He's the guy guarding the ball. He's literally doing everything for for the team and playing 30 plus minutes a game. I think he's an incredible player as he continues to improve it. I think he's got really, really pro potential as he continues to improve his athleticism and things like that. But he's yeah, I think he's an absolute stud, and has a lot going for him moving forward.
One guy that a lot of people were really excited about coming into this year was a guy that you have, some experience with, or at least know a little bit in Daniel Freitag. And
Yeah.
it hasn't necessarily gone the way I think a lot of people thought it was going to. And he's hasn't gotten a ton of minutes this year. When you know him a little bit, what do you think it is? Now, I know I should say I know what's keeping him off the floor, but what do you think he needs to do, and what do you think his ceiling is? Because guys that don't get to play right away, especially in this environment, are very likely, all right, I'm not playing. I'll see you later.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you before I go, like you're there more than me. So what do you think it is that's keeping him off the floor?
Well, I mean, I think even though they don't play a ton of defense, I think defense is part of it. And
Yeah.
I also think And I also think that when he's on the floor, he tries to make every play the best play that's ever been played. And it leads to turnovers. And we saw that in his limited action when we got to see him earlier in the year. So I think those two things would be at the top of the list, but I think there's probably might be a laundry list of things. And also Kamari, who's essentially is essentially taking the minutes that he might get, is a guy that Greg Gard can count on and believes in. So I think that all plays around in it, but I still think Daniel has so much talent that it feels like it's unavoidable at some point that it's going to show out.
Yeah, no, I think Daniel, honestly, athletically might be the most athletic guard since Devin, maybe, to come through the program. I think Daniel he wants to be so good, and he wants to be so good right now, which is what you want, right? Like you want someone who cares, and you want someone. So I think for Daniel, just slowing down, and understanding like it's a process and enjoying the process. Kobe did a podcast a long time ago with the Jay Shetty guy. And it's a clip that always resurfaces and just talks about like leaning into emotions and embracing the emotions rather than, getting like you're frustrated, like lean into that frustration, understand why rather than letting it continually frustrate you. So for Daniel, I think it's really just like, let me sit here and be okay with, yeah, I'm frustrated, I'm not playing, whatever everybody would be, but let me figure that out, and understand why I'm not playing, and let me address that in the moment rather than looking farther out and being like, hey, I need to be playing 20 minutes again, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So, which is normal. He's a kid. He's 18 years old. I mean, a lot of people, when I was a freshman, I was playing 15 minutes a game. I thought I should have been playing 30, and I wanted to go play somewhere where where someone's going to play me 30 and let me shoot 15 times a game. Like part of it's delusion from kids. But again, that delusion is big because that's what makes all of us able to do what we can do. But yeah, for Daniel, he'll be fine. I think again, that's part of the thing that I look forward to at having a relationship with him is helping him assess his situation instead of you have all these people who are going to tell him, hey, you can go here and do this, where it's like, all right, let's take a step back and really be like, all right, what's best for Daniel and where can you thrive? And it doesn't mean that you have to go somewhere else. It could be right there. And I think Daniel will be absolutely fine. I think he has a bright future, at Wisconsin, and moving forward.
I think it's a good reminder too, just about that everybody goes at a different pace. I mean,
Yeah.
being able to be trusted is the most important thing. Even Kamari McGee, look at when he first got here, I think he was kind of sped up. It was a little bit different level coming from Green Bay. And now he's someone that Greg clearly trusts as the first kind of so-called point guard coming off the bench. And you can just see it in Daniel. It feels like he wants to hit that home run, but the speed of the game is so different. You look at the Detroit Mercy game. I think he ended up with like 4 fouls and in a few minutes. But yeah, the athleticism is off the chart. There are certain plays that he makes in practice, and you go, "Oh my god!" And if you can just put it together, I know Badgers fans have been waiting on that.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on transfer portal and NIL? Like, I think it's always interesting to hear from people who went through all of this when that stuff didn't exist. I mean, do you think you would have stuck around? Do you what do you think about what you're seeing and how different that is for the entire landscape?
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to everything. I think that again, this is direct what I talked about in terms of being able to give back. Like this is kind of a way that I want to give to kids, and I have a couple partners, and we're doing that. We have a couple of different. We have not a couple. We have a company trying to help kids with that. But I think, well, first, if I was around, I think my going into my senior year would have been tough, like because I think just hearing some of the numbers that these guys are getting, I think there's a threshold of I wouldn't have wanted to leave Wisconsin, but there's a threshold of all right, if you're getting this, then you don't have a good choice. I think that with the nature of it now, kids owe it to themselves. The people that they're listening to owe it to them to really just give care and thought and strategy to their situation, right? So if you're taking, I'll give an example. If you're taking, Billy Bob from, school A and he's a freshman, he's not playing. Like, all right, let's think. And somebody comes from school B and says, here's $150,000. Like 100, that's a lot of money, right? And school A is given $50,000. All right, let's talk about what's important to you. Is it money? Is it playing time? Is it education? Really sit down and let's actually make a strategy and a plan rather than just saying here, let's, because honestly, for keeping it real, that 150 after tax, it's not that much money in the grand scheme of your life, like the next 40 years, right? It's a lot of money, but um, I think that players need to just have people and more players need to come back and give that game because even though we didn't have the portal, we do know I do know what it's like to have to switch teams 3 times and go to a different country. And it's not easy. And sometimes it's not fun. It's hard to get acclimated. It takes 5 months to make new friends, get situated in a new system. And that's as a grown man at 26. So sorry to be long-winded. I'm kind of passionate about this topic in general, but I think the biggest thing is that kids owe it to themselves is make sure they're dealing with people who have care, thought, and strategy. And a lot of times the agents get involved. The agency system is built on codependency, right? They want you to have to come to them. Whereas I think the exact opposite. The people representing you should look at it almost like raising kids, for lack of a better comparison, where I want to educate you and get you off this codependency. You should be able to go out and understand and ask the right questions and get the right information so that you're not making bad decisions because you have a short window to play this game and it could set you back. I mean, not to rail on Pharrell Payne but you look at him in Minnesota and he went to Texas A&M. He's having a good year. But he was going to be all Big Ten at Minnesota and he went for whatever. So he still ended up good and he'll be fine. But just looking at those situations, most times players that transfer end up with lesser roles, and the grass isn't always greener. So apologize for the sermon, but
No, I think it's enlightening, and I also think just the whole transfer aspect of this it's not great if you're like a purist. It isn't, which is fine. If you don't want, I mean, but that's also the world we live in, and you're gonna have to come around to it. And hopefully, there are things put in place here in the next few years to maybe regulate it a little bit, just so it's just not the Wild West that it is right now. Certainly, but it also makes for an interesting way to try and figure out which teams are any good. And 13, 14 games of the season. Do you know who is good and who is not in the Big Ten yet?
Well, in the Big Ten, I think that Maryland is really good. I think Maryland is very good. I think Michigan is really good. Those are kind of the 2 teams that I'm like, all right, that I've seen, and I'm slow to say that also because Michigan was the first team that I saw, and I was kind of like Dusty May. I think he's unbelievable. I sat with him for 5 minutes, and I was just like he. As a player, I was like, all right, this guy gets it. Like I would love to go play for him. Um, those are the 2 teams that really UCLA can really guard, and Mick Cronin's got the old school, which is huge in this transfer world. You need, again, those are kind of people that you want to play, the guys that hold you accountable. But then again, I think the Big Ten is going to beat each other up. I think it's going to be tough for UCLA to come to Madison in February or whenever they come, if they come, and stay in sub freezing weather and and then go to the Kohl Center. But the Michigan and Maryland are the 2 teams that have really stood out to me early on.
What's crazy to me about the Big Ten, and I feel like this is about the moment where you can start to make some of those determinations of whether a team is good, because now you've got more than a third of the season. You're getting into conference play. 8 teams are ranked ahead of Wisconsin in the NCAA net rankings, which is one of the big factors the NCAA tournament committee uses. And yet Wisconsin is like 32. And it's just Big Ten is a damn good conference this year. I totally agree with you. I think these guys are just going to beat the crap out of each other, which they always do. The difference is maybe they'll be scoring more points this year.
Yeah. That'll be fun to watch. Of course, I had the Ohio State game in Indiana State. It was like 52-47 at halftime. I was like, oh, this is all right. I can rock with this. Again, pass it to the basket. But I'll go back to your point about, the purists too. I think one thing that purists will love about this kind of new system is everybody seems to be getting older. So you do the IQ level of the players, I think, is higher because you have those older, you have 23, 24-year-old seniors. And then I think, one thing that we didn't do, you kind of knew when I chose Wisconsin, I'm at my parents' house for the holidays, and the board that my dad put together a board, and he said Trayvon Hughes is a sophomore, I was a senior, he's going to be a junior. He's like, you can play a lot by the time you're a sophomore, and you can, essentially be your team by the time you're a junior. So I was able to see that. So it was almost like you went in as a freshman, kind of, all right, like you take it serious, but also you have time. Now these kids are like, I think the professionalism is kind of going up to a degree, which in some cases where I think is great. They're approaching it. They're like, all right, I'm getting 15 minutes a game, but I'm getting paid, and this 15 minutes could lead to something greater. So it's like there's a sense of urgency at all times. And if you're not playing, it's like, how do I get on the floor to get to the money? So I think that's been one of the beautiful things about it.
I've kept you way too long, but I just want one more question for you. What does a successful rest of the season look like for Wisconsin? And they are a tournament team in your mind? Question mark?
No, I think they're a tournament team. Like the net rankings point, I think that it could be a timing thing, and hopefully they don't get beat up at the wrong time. But I think talent wise, coaching wise, obviously, I think they're a tournament team. I think a successful season for them is I'm still a player, so a successful season is a Big Ten title and a national championship. Like that's always the goal, right? But I think they're Sweet 16 capable. I think they're Elite Eight capable if they, especially with Nolan playing the way he is. Kamari continuing to get more comfortable. John's going to shoot the ball better than he has, and he's going to find even more offensive rhythm. And I think if they hit it at the right time, I think they can play with Michigan. They can play with Maryland. No question.
Got one more, Jesse? You good?
I think we're good. We kept you a long time. You probably got some game prep you need to get.
No, that's not. It's got all that stuff done. I'm glad to be here. You guys can, I'll stay, whatever. It's your show, but it's I'm having a good
time. We really appreciate your time as always, Jordan, and look forward to having you on probably as we get closer to March. If that's okay with you.
Beautiful. Just hit me up whenever. I'll be there. All
right, there he is, Jordan Taylor, Wisconsin legend and soon to be Big Ten Network legend. Is that okay or no?
Again, your definition, not mine. I'm rolling with it. You can say it as much as you want, man. I appreciate you guys having me, and Happy New Year.
All right, we appreciate Jordan jumping on with us. Always a good time talking to him. A few questions we should have asked him more, but we'll leave that for next time. But yeah, I think he's got a bright future in media. I think he's extremely bright, and I think has a feel for a lot of things that are going on in the game right now. I think he's very good.
He's always been good. My first season on the beat was the 2011-2012 season, which was his senior year. So I had a chance to actually cover him that year. Obviously, by then he'd been an All-American, and he's been a very good interview all that time. And I think it helps to be articulate and have a knowledge of the game. Even the way he was breaking down John Blackwell, I was like, wow, that's exactly what you want from a guy who's been in his position, to be able to explain why it is that John is doing all these things well and what the challenges are.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's jump into this. Overreaction or no? I believe haven't done this football for a while either, but overreaction or no? The Badgers will go only as far as Stephen Crowell can take them. Is that an overreaction or no?
I guess I'll say overreaction, because I think they've got enough guys that can overcome.
What is him
right
doing to put them on their back, like on his back? Like I don't know, but like we talked about this obviously right before Jordan, but you can't have games like you have against Illinois, and I feel like he's had way too many of those this year, and it just doesn't make a ton of sense because he's gone through this whole thing. Do you think at some point the confidence takes a hit, and then maybe it leads to that? Because I don't notice anything like outwardly in his body language, and that's always a very, very dangerous thing to look at. But like his demeanor, it doesn't feel like it changes very often.
I don't expect it at this point in his career to be like a confidence thing if he has a bad game. I mean, and I say that in part because of the way he responded in the couple games after that. And I realize, yeah, you're not playing Illinois in those games, though Butler is certainly a solid team. But I don't know what Wisconsin will go as far as Stephen Crowell takes them. I mean, he doesn't have to give you 20 and 12 in a game. I think he just has to be an important piece to this puzzle. Wisconsin has enough people around him to be able to overcome if Steven doesn't have his best game. But if this team is going to click on all cylinders when you get to postseason play, certainly he's got to be more productive.
Staying on the same position, Nolan Winter is the next great Wisconsin big man.
Man,
overreaction or no?
I want to say at this point it's a bit of an overreaction. Not that I don't think he's got a really bright future, but like this may goes back to definition, like great big man. I mean, what exactly does that mean? You can roll your eyes. What does that mean in terms of production?
I think it just means that is in the same breath as an Ethan Happ or a Nigel Hayes or a I'm not going to put him in Frank Kaminsky category, but like a Brian Butch, a John Lure, like some of the guys that are really, really good players, forwards. Not all of them fives, and Nolan can play the 4 or the 5. So that's what I'm saying. Is he going to be thought of? Is he going to be thought of like those guys are?
A lot of those guys were all Americans at their best, and so I think that's the challenge here. Is kind of like it's not apples to apples, but you think about like running backs in the Wisconsin room. And so you can have a really good running back here, but he's not quite at the level of a lot of those other guys. I'm not saying Nolan can't be there, but he's got, I mean, look, he's a sophomore. He's made a huge leap here this year. So I think he's certainly got all Big Ten potential. And if you get to that level, then perhaps you can put yourself in that next stratosphere. But he can do a lot of really good things. He can stretch the floor. He can score inside. He's so much stronger this year. So there's absolutely a lot to like about him. Those guys, you know, the Lures of the world. And I realize Kaminsky's in a different category, but like Happ and stuff. Those are like the guys you put the team on that guy's back. And maybe that is Winter in a year or two.
I mean, I think it's very possible it could be. Him and John Blackwell coming in the same class and going through this thing together. I don't even know why we're doing this because who knows what next offseason will bring. I don't want to get into that because that just makes people sad or upset or apathetic. But whatever, he has that type of ability. We've seen that over especially the last 3 games where he's had, he's averaging like 18 and 9 a game, I think, or 18 and 8 a game over these last 3. Nope, 18 and 9 over the last 3 games. I think that's kind of who the guy he can be, and I think his shot's going to continue to come along. He's got a good looking, at least stroke shot. Yeah, he's got a good looking shot. So I think that there's more there for him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like if you can play at an 18-9, 18-10 level, that is all conference worthy stuff. 3 game is a good start. And obviously, when Steven Crowell moves on, he's going to be a bigger focal point. But there's a lot to like about his game at this point. Long way to go, obviously.
This one comes from our conversation with Jordan. He said that he believes they have Sweet 16/Elite 8 type of ability if they were to play it to their best. Overreaction or no, Wisconsin will make it to the second weekend of the tournament.
Ooh, boy, really put me on the spot here. I'll say overreaction at this point. You can say this about any Wisconsin team ever, other than the one that finished with a losing record when Brad Davison was a freshman, probably. Like if you get to the tournament, if you play at your best, you can get to the second weekend. I think my big concerns are defense. If you get to the tournament, you're playing a damn good team, obviously. Maybe the first round, depending on what your seed, you should win. But by the second round, it may be close to a toss-up. And I know Wisconsin is scoring at a really high rate. I do perhaps worry about, okay, you're going to take 27 threes a game, which they are. That's their average. That's a program record. What happens if you go 5 for 27 and you're not playing really great defense? I think that's the holdup that I have at this point about, can they break through and finally get to that Sweet 16, which hasn't happened for Wisconsin in 7 years, 8 years?
Yeah. They're shooting 32% right now.
Yeah,
it's not like
I looked it up. They're 250th in the country in 3-point shooting percentage.
it's one thing to shoot them. You got to make them. Like that's fantastic that you're shooting that many. And that's when we talked to Greg before the season, it was, between 27 and 32 a game or whatever it's going to be. And for a large stretch of that, especially when they were playing well, they were still at 1 point per possession on those things. And I mean, it's very, very tough if you're going to shoot 32%. You're going to have to keep on doing the other things like getting to the line a bunch and getting a lot of shots at the rim. But that's who they're going to be. They're not going to stop taking them. And also, we know that John Blackwell's a better shooter than he's shown right now. And we know Max Klesmit's a better shooter than he's shown right now. If you get those two to shoot the way that they did last year, well, then that number is going to creep up. And maybe you get to 35, 36, which is that's about where you would expect them to be. 35, 36, 37. Because, I mean, if you shoot 37%, that's really, really good. 32%, not so much. It has to be, it's going to be in that high 35, low 36, maybe even 37. And if you're doing that, they're going to be very tough to stop. But when you're shooting it like they are right now, it's not ideal.
Yeah, you need some other things to hold up too. Are they going to be an 85% free throw shooting team when you get down the stretch and your legs are tired and you've played more games? So there's a lot of things that have to go well. But I think the encouraging thing is having this conversation at all, because they're going into the season, would have said maybe at best feels like a toss-up about they're even an NCAA tournament type of team. But at least at this point, they've put themselves in position going into the heart of Big Ten play.
Well, I mean, they are currently 16th in the Big Ten.
So. Well, the first two games, not ideal, going 0-2, which very rarely happens at Wisconsin, but a lot of opportunities.
Had been a while since that happened. But yeah, they will face Iowa coming up here on Friday and jump back into Big Ten play. They've got 18 Big Ten games to go, and we'll be with you throughout the January and February and into March, and probably not in April, but probably, we'll see. We'll see how things go. Jesse, I hope you have a great New Year's, and we will catch up on the camp coming up on Thursday. We'll be back with the swing next week. So I appreciate your time.
Yep. Talk soon.
All right. There he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Swing.